Hello everybody, I'm Jack Dennis, and many of you know me from my fly fishing books and instructional DVDs. You may not know that I'm also a coach of Fly Fishing Team USA, America's team in the World Fly Fishing Championships. Many years ago, I got a chance to meet a world champion, Vladi, who was a champion of the world in 1989 in Finland, right?
Right.
He started a new technique with that championship. A technique we kind of call Polish nymphing, which is after the Poles. The Czechs adopted, then it became Czech nymphing. Modifications. Then Spanish nymphing. We call it Euro nymphing or European nymphing. We're going to introduce you to this technique. Vladi's going to teach you. We're here on the Big Thompson River in Colorado. We're here at the National Fly Fishing Championships, where a lot of people are going to be using Euro nymphing to try to win the national championship, right?
Right.
Vladi does seminars literally around the world on this technique, and you're going to be blessed with his instruction because you're learning from the master. So let's get started.
Okay.
First thing Vladi's going to do is fish the water closest to him before he wades out. He's casting up. Notice the line, there's not a big belly. He's moving the rod tip. He's going to rotate his wrist with a little quick flick and cast it up. No false casting. Again, look at the angle of the line. Comes back. Now, the reason he's flicking that wrist is the fish sometimes will follow the fly. By flicking the wrist, it'll move it enough, and a lot of times they'll grab it. In fact, I'm going to bet that we're going to see a fish caught with that flick of the wrist. Notice how he's extending himself. It's very important to understand this cast. Watch how his arm is just like the rod. Now notice how he brings the rod over like that. He brings that over there so that it keeps the angle of the line going upstream. So all the line lands upstream. You don't have a belly in the line where the line is pulling the fly. The anchor fly is hitting the bottom. Now, many times in the course of the next few minutes, we're going to be talking about line and what that line's going to do for you. You're going to actually see the line jumping up and down. And when you see that line jumping up and down, that means it's touching the bottom. And between his fingers, he's going to feel a lot. The more you fish this technique, the more you're going to understand what the relationship between that line through the leader into the fly. Why do you have that relationship? It's because you're pulling the line. You're feeling it. And that is where the European type of fishing really shines in this type of water. The rod is straight above the line and he's leading it. He's actually letting the fly sink. By holding the rod up higher, it's sinking down. Now see how he brings the rod down? Now it's right on the bottom then. Again, it's sinking. See, this is a little bit technique. He's not really pulling it. This is why I say the more I watch him fish. Now see how he raises his arm up? The arm and the rod are one. And that's the hardest part of this, everybody, is learning to do that. Because we're used to fishing a whole different way. We're not used to fishing our whole arm. Now again, he's letting it sink. You're going to rotate the wrist. There he goes, and there's a fish. Flying fish, no less. I know there's bigger fish out there, and you're going to watch in a minute, you're going to see them being caught.
It's a little guy.
Yeah.
Yes. Fish. Opa! Nice fish.
Come on, fish.
Okay.
Really good place to try your European nymphing. Notice that Vladi is going for the rocks, trying to cast so that it gets swept by the edges of the rocks. This time of the day, high sun, the fish are going to be tucked into those rocks, being opportunistic. He's pulling them a little bit slower than he would in the faster water. Again, letting him get hit the bottom that time. Really see here how the rod is pointing and following the fly. The current is going to dictate how fast he pulls the fly. Again, working the rocks, trying to find any fish that might be tucked right on the bottom, still feeding. European nymphing works very well in the heat of the day when there isn't a hatch, when you have to really, like, as they say, farm a fish out. I call it a good lunch technique. Bring out the rod at lunch, practice your European technique. Now he's working closer towards the other side. Notice that he stepped forward. He repositions and steps very methodically. Raising his rod tip up.
Change fly.
Change flies. Now he's going to change some flies. He's not getting the effect. Now how would you know when to change flies? Well, that's a feel that you're going to get when you think you should have had a fish, which he thought, and didn't get one. Now we're doing a downstream, swinging it farther down, letting the current swing it. Again, a good caddis technique. So the caddis will go with the current and swing to the surface. Let me go quite deep now, right on the bottom. There we go. Oh, that was a nice fish. Really working those rocks. Little backwaters behind the rocks. Rocks, of course, affect the current. And what you don't see on the surface, there we go, went right through the rock. That's just where I expected it to be a fish. Notice again how fast from the competition, he makes sure he gets them right in. Notice where the net was, so he just kind of slides them right in. This is why he was the world champion.
Hey.
What you just saw was Vladi hook that fish with his Polish technique. This is where it really shines. The current goes behind the rock and gets sucked in. If you have a strike indicator, what it'll do is that when the fly gets sucked in, it pulls the indicator down. With this technique, the rod's high, the fly gets sucked into the rock, you pull it back out, the fish sees it, and just what you saw right there, you connect up. It's a deadly technique when fishing behind a rock. One of the problems is the rock, especially when they're submerged, doesn't show you that little sucking in current that makes it so effective, and why fish can just lay in there and wait for the flies to come to them. He's working this area. He's keeping a lower profile. Notice one knee is down, the other is up. Gives him good stability, keeps his profile low. And again, he's working where he thinks there ought to be fish. Going a little deeper.
Nice water.
Now we're coming up behind a rock, a very good spot. You're going to work the edge of the current. This is again where a European method is very effective. Heavy water, difficult, looks like the fly change. He's going to go to a heavier fly to get it down deeper. He worked his way up a shallow area to get into the deeper pocket, and now he's going to make the change to fly.
Don't see any fish here. Surprise! My worm fly worm fly is good.
We're going to go to a pretty deep pool that would be very difficult to fish with an indicator. One, you'd get somewhat of success, but probably not as much as if you'd learned this technique. Now, Vladi, it's really important how you hold your rod to control the depth of the fly and how fast you pull it, right?
Yes. When I cast, to the pool like this, to deep water, fast water, like rapids, I try to put my flies to the bottom, especially the anchor fly.
Right.
And then I try move both flies a little bit faster than current. Because every insects, when they come from the bottom, they're a little bit faster.
They propel themselves. Either they're like caddis propel themselves, mayflies will swim, some will just drift up to the surface so they can hatch.
Yeah, they can hatch. And then I move my flies a little bit faster than current. And on the end, try to set a little bit faster, but this is a very short movement. And this movement can imitate.
Imitates?
Imitates the movement of the insects.
Actually,
so
you're
it's
keeping
very
it.
important.
Now, I think this is important for all of you out there to understand. You're really not pulling. You think you might be pulling it fast in the current, but really what you're doing is keeping your line tight so that you feel a fish strike. Within an indicator, you don't know where your fly is. Here you know how your fly is moving because you're the one controlling it. And every time I watch this man fish, I learn something new. So let's go show us a little bit about that. I'm going to wander out with you, but let me talk to you about another thing too. This is not something your buddy hangs next to you. You don't do that. You do it by yourself. You get down low in a lot of places. You crawl. It's not a buddy system, is it?
Yeah, but some fish are in shallow water and see you immediately.
Right.
I try to be always on the not when the sun is going to my face. I try to be like that. The fish don't see the shadow.
Right.
The shadow,
Again, you can see a little bit different water in this part. He's casting upstream. Again, immediate contact with the line. Look at the rod. He's following the rod. Watch the line. Looked like he might have had a little bump right there. A little higher rod, letting it get deeper. He's gonna pull it now just slightly. Again, watch the rod tip. Very important to see where this line is. It's between that middle finger. Again, he's following it down. The faster the water, many times the shorter the pull or the stroke almost, the way that he's working this. Now see how he's extending his arm? Rod tip goes lower to the water. He's actually bumping right on the bottom. You can see the line, how it was jumping. Look how it's jumping. We're gonna extend the drift by actually leaning the rod tip and the whole rod into the water. Again, keeping in contact, watch this. He's going to then tilt the rod down, extend the arm, and increase the drift. Now, the next cast, he's going to keep it high, as you can see right here. Again, it's at a different water level. You want to vary your drifts. Some in tight to the water, some a little higher, some a little quicker, some a little slower. Now, Vladi, let me ask you, what are you trying to feel here? What do you feel?
I feel immediately when, like you says, I control all the time flies. I have contact with the flies.
You feel the fly through the
Any
rod.
touch I feel immediately here. Any touch. And the thing is that sometimes I feel bottom. I feel everything what is on the bottom.
But you're also watching that line too.
Yeah, but you know, I watch line because sometimes line is straight.
It goes in. Could that mean something has happened? A
yeah,
connection.
something is connection. Yeah.
You're using all your senses, aren't you? You're using the feel from the line. And your eyes.
And my eyes.
And then
everything.
also you're using something else.
Yeah.
It's right up
that's
here.
True.
That you just know there's a fish there, and I'm going to set it because it should be there, right?
Yeah, that's true. You must reach water.
Right, read water.
Read water. If you fish with this method.
You don't fish water there isn't going to be a fish in, are you?
but you must always thinking. It's never like this. You can come to water and bark and fish. No.
Okay, now we fish this pretty carefully.
Yeah.
What would you fish it any different? We've tried, 5 or 6 casts.
I try to be a little bit
up in there.
Up
okay,
in there.
let's do that. Let's do that.
Because I think the flies is going to deeper. Right?
About each current is going to dictate how you move that line.
I agree.
The number one problem that I see when I see people first learn this, they cast and they don't immediately start pulling the line. That is a hard thing for most anglers in America to understand. The minute that line hits, you're going to be in contact.
Immediately you must have contact. Sometimes you can cast and immediately you have fish. You feel like immediately. Because always fish watching, something in the water.
Now, how would you fish that riff over there?
You see is a V over there. I try to cast up.
Well, show me. Come on, just show me. Let's get.
Okay.
We'll go real slow. I don't want to go swimming. It's the end of the day, and.
See, I try to be in V.
Ooh, that looked pretty good.
See, little.
But I would definitely want to be where that edge is, because those fish are going to lay in there, aren't they?
That's true.
Well, I thought you had one there.
Maybe. I don't think so. There's too many fish here, but who knows?
Now, would you think?
Try to be near the stone, very close to the rock here, to the stone here.
Notice how the rod is lower.
Only like this.
And it's going right under the rock.
Because always in the bottom of the rock, could big hole.
The current is actually taking and pulling the fly into the rock, and he's allowing that to happen with the swing of the rod.
See.
Ooh. That's where Mr. Big Brown Trout would be laying.
Yes.
Okay, now what about the tail of the pool here? If we don't get anything here, would you fish the tail?
We go down.
Okay,
No,
we're going to go down and fish the
we go
tail.
down. Go on. I know now where they are.
We're going to take you through the equipment, how to rig up the European nymphing systems, and get a little advice from Vladi. First of all, rod. They probably have a 9-foot rod, most people do.
Yeah, mostly they use 9 foot, 9.6, 10 foot, you know, because some people they like longer rods. As like me, I use 9, I use 10, you know, but some people like French guys use almost 12 feet rod because they present new technique, you know, with casting.
And we're going to learn some of that technique too. Line. You use a floating line, right?
Yeah, always floating line.
Double tapered or weight forward?
Weight forward, you know,
Oh.
that's the main line. You can use also a sinking line, but it's
No point really.
No point because it's very not good casting with those lines.
Understand, you're not going to have a lot of line out, so the line is really not much of a factor. It's how you rig this leader up, and that's what we're going to talk about. First of all, I noticed that you have your leader butt section.
Yeah.
And it's kind of unique.
Yes. Maybe such this, because you know this I use like connector. to the other leaders, you know. And then I going to use some kind of monofill, color monofill, because
Right there.
like me, old man, I must see a little bit better, not like before.
So much of this technique has to do with all the senses, both visual,
Of course,
right?
quite
Visual.
right,
Then maybe what's in your mind,
of course.
but one of the most important is feeling the fly line. Next,
Next,
the whole leader. Now, what about length?
about length, I use like from my hand to my neck here. That's about, I don't know, really. In a
About
feet.
3 feet.
3 feet, around 3 feet. And then coming dropper.
Now, dropper. The first question you're going to say, why a dropper? Well, the technique that this system uses is actually pulling the fly, and the dropper becomes two aspects: a way to change flies quickly, but also the way that they're pulled through the water. So when you put on a dropper, one of the most popular ways is to do a blood knot and let the ear of the blood knot hang out. That's not what you want to do here. We're going to show you how to tie a perfection loop setup, and this is probably one of the hardest things for people to understand. Blood knots, whether you use a surgeon knot, it's a knot. These leaders are sectioned, and they're sectioned for a reason, to keep the flies separated. Now, in world fly fishing competition, you use multiple flies, don't you?
Yeah.
And why do you use multiple flies?
You know, in a competition you can use 3 flies, but mostly I fish with 2 flies because, you know, 3 flies sometimes are more complicated. They twist, you know, but in a competition the dropper cannot move. You know?
It can't
Yes,
slide, so it has
can
to be
slide.
attached.
Has to be attached.
Now you notice this is sliding. When we talk about this dropper, this is put on with the perfection loop, but the beautiful thing about this is easy to take off when you have to change flies.
Right.
Now, distances. Now, I notice that this is probably about, I would say 10 to 12 inches. How short would you make these? Is there any kind of formula?
Yeah, if I fish deep water, I can I put always a longer dropper. If I fish shallow water, can be like this too. You know, it's much easier to cast. You cannot hang it, you know, the dropper between stones sometimes if you fish, you know, shallow water.
And another aspect too is if you hook this on something, you can break this off and not lose your whole rig.
Yeah,
that's another, of course, aspect of multiple rigs. Another thing that I think is important when we talk about having this perfection loop and how it slides is the ability to do this, right? It can rotate.
Yeah.
See how that rotates around? And that keeps the tangles to a minimum. Now, the first thing you're going to say, oh boy, I'm going to tangle a lot. That's probably one of the drawbacks of the system. You are going to tangle, but everybody who's fly fish knows that tangle's a part of fishing. All right, now, this is probably going to be the key element to this whole system. And I know that you know this English word, anchor.
Anchor.
What is it in Polish?
Ciężarek.
I want everybody to memorize that.
Very difficult.
Why? Why? Why the anchor nymph?
Because, you know, when I follow the nymph, I must have a little bit power on my line.
Weight. Get it down in there.
Then I can easily move, you know, the 2 flies. Of course, anchor fly can catch fish, and dropper almost the same.
Now, I want you to think of this. Now, this is going to be something that is really going to be the key to this. When you have a strike indicator on the surface, what does that do? It's a bobber. It's a fly fisherman's term for a bobber. What is it? It holds the fly out there. It hangs it so it stays in the same level. Well, let's take the anchor nymph and reverse it. The anchor nymph goes, and it's the indicator on the bottom. In other words, by it bouncing on the bottom, boom, 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 on the bottom, it holds this fly at the same level. So it's a strike indicator in reverse. Think of a heavy strike indicator. And now, one of the elements that I tell everybody is like an airplane, where you have controls. It controls whether you go up or down. Well, guess what? Vladi's arm here is going to be that control, because however he moves the rod up and down will determine where this fly is in the water column. And how fast he pulls it will also give that element. So as you can see, it's very important. There's a lot of aspects. If you think the thing is simple, be a golfer. One of the most simple maneuvers in the world is a golf swing. Boom, bring it back, bring it forward. Here, you pull the fly. Guess what? There's all those little turns and twists, raising and lower, that we're about to show you. But it starts with rigging this up. Now, one of the questions I want to ask you, Vladi, what is your total length of leader? Because that's going to be a real important part of this.
Very important part. I use with Polish method, with my, I should say my method, I use 2/3 length of my rod.
All right, 2/3 the length of the rod.
Yeah.
Okay, so that if the rod is 9 feet, it's going to be about a 7-foot leader.
7-foot leader.
Yeah.
And much easier to see the bottom part of the line, and it's much helpful when you fish with my method.
Now, after the Czechs saw you win the World Championships, they developed, which is probably a little more catchier name, Czech nymphing, and they gave it a lot of publicity.
Yeah, of course, you know, I'm not worried about this, but every country, a lot of fishermen, they modified kind of
Modifications.
modifications, you know. I should say the Czech make very good flies, and last success they come from, you know.
Now let me ask you this, as we're rigging up, and I've seen this done by the Czechs, where they put the weight in the middle fly,
Yeah.
and then it anchors down, and then this fly then comes up.
Yeah.
Now,
You
is
can
that a
do it-
method that they did, or
You can-
did you
yeah,
do that?
You can do it this too, but if I fish deep water, my anchor, my bottom fly is heavier than dropper. If I fish shallow water, my dropper is heavier than the bottom
Aha.
fly. That's
So the
something
rigging
new.
is really important here. The
Yes.
rigging is very important, that you
Because-
rig it for different types of water.
Yeah, of
So
course.
let's take a review of this leader. You know, you have the anchor fly. Now we can change the anchor fly because it's the weight. It's a heavier fly in shallow water to the dropper fly. So it becomes the anchor fly is the dropper fly, and your lighter fly is on the point fly. Man, remember, point fly. Now, let's review the leader in length. It can vary according to water depth. We're going to learn more about it when we do fishing. It's important that you have these knots, and so the leaders can go back and forth between it. What about dropper length? Again, determined on the depth of the water. All this will become more apparent when we get actually down to the fishing. I'm going to introduce you to a Team USA member, Pete Erickson from Boise, Idaho. He's going to introduce you to Spanish nymphing. How'd you find out about this?
Team USA, we were in Spain, and we were lucky enough to be guided by a 2-time national champion, and he got out on the river and started doing something that looked really, really weird to us. And we asked him if he would show us how to do it, and he said, yeah.
One of the big aspects of this is that you use a longer leader.
Sometimes up to 27 feet.
But there was something that I tore, and that was his name, introduced it to, and that was a section of colored leader. It was golden in color.
Yeah, you can use a couple different kinds. He also used fluorocarbon, red, yellow, even green too.
In America, the leader lengths aren't usually that long, are they?
No, and in fact, when I teach people how to Spanish nymph, I usually start them out with a 9-foot Spanish nymphing leader because it's easier to handle, you know.
But Itor used, what, up to 28 feet?
Yeah, he said, I mean, we did the math on the metrics because I'm not so good with that, but it was probably pushing 30 feet.
But the flies are the same as what we use in regular European nymphing?
Vladi's flies actually work really well with this technique, and in fact, Taught used a lot of Vladi flies.
So we're going to go out on the Big Thompson. You just finished the National Fly Fishing Championship. How'd you do?
I'm tired. I just got off the river a couple minutes ago. I don't know what the final standings will be, but I was second going into today, and keep my fingers crossed that I stayed up there toward the top.
Well, the technique is going to have some similarities, but the way this is rigged up, and there are some things that you're going to learn here that's going to work on your water. So let's get started on the Big Thompson.
Yeah, this looks like a great stretch of river for this.
Yeah, it's great. That beautiful day too. You know, when we're walking down, we were talking about this technique uses more line and leader than the traditional Polish and Czech European techniques.
It does. That's one of the reasons that I like it so much. You actually get to use a little bit of fly line, and the leaders are much longer too.
I noticed you have a section, it looks like about 2 feet of, I would call it golden strand.
You could certainly use golden strand.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of different colored monofilaments, colored fluorocarbons that you can use as this, basically it's an indicator. And it's a key component to the Spanish nymphing style.
This can be more visual than probably the other technique, as you can see that.
It is, it's fun.
One of the important parts of Spanish nymphing is you can really fish deep water well in heavy, fast raging rivers.
Heavy, fast water. Well, think about it. You've got straight fluorocarbon, so it sinks like a rock. And plus you have long leaders, so you have reach. In case you can't get to something, you can fish a seam on the other side of a boulder or a deep pool.
You know where I know this would really work well is in New Zealand.
Oh, I'm sure
where you
it
had
would.
to go deep into some of those deep pools right on the bottom.
Another thing that's beautiful about Spanish nymphing is it's great for spooky fish.
Oh, that's another thing. I noticed that we've got some spooky fish in front of us here, and we're down in the water.
Oh, absolutely. This is a great looking hole, but I think some of these fish are kind of wary of us right now.
Well, it's bright sun, October day. Well, let's get started. Okay. Now, this is, again, no false casting, right?
Right, with a leader that's, I'm probably going to go with about a 12 or 13 foot leader. I usually recommend when I instruct on Spanish nymphing, start with about a 9. It's much easier to cast, but I'm going to go with a little bit bigger. And you can't false cast it or else you'll tangle it. So you get one lob.
One lob.
Fishing.
All right.
And I'll lob it. And then there's a lot of maintenance here. I got to bring that indicator up a little bit.
Well, I can see it right out of the water.
And I see the backward C.
Yep, yep.
That would let me know if I have a fish. And see, I just checked to see if I had one.
Yep.
And I'm back in. And you got to check it, whether it's a rock or a fish. You got to check everything. And there you go. You can even have it. You can even have it swing out, and maybe even twitch the flies a little bit at the end. Yeah, which is kind of a nice part of this technique as well.
Good swimming caddis technique.
You can do just about anything with Spanish nymphing. I like to. The main use really is Polish nymphing from a distance.
Polish nymphing from a distance. That's a good way to put it.
Now, if I can free myself up here, watch. I'm going to lead the flies after I lob it into this hole. Now, of course, I just did a false cast, but you're not supposed to. Watch. See how I'm leading the flies? They're actually cruising along.
This cast is interesting. It's different than Vladi's cast, isn't it?
Yes, it's actually called a lob. And if you watch, I lead with the back of my hand, and that lob actually gives me a tuck cast.
Boy, Taught was a master of it, wasn't he?
Oh,
Rockfish.
little rock. Watch.
They use the master of that
You
lob.
lead with the back of the hand, and it actually tuck casts in. You dial in to where you can see your indicator and float through the hole.
And you're just increasingly going further into the hole, aren't you?
Yep, I'm working my way over right now.
This would be a great technique for using like a girdle bug or even a woolly bug or yuck bug.
True, I have not found a fly that doesn't respond to this technique. I really haven't. It's a pretty cool technique. You can even do it with emergers, small nymphs. I really like the Polish nymphs for this stuff. And that's what I have on right now. We'll see if these brown trout respond to the Polish nymph. I will add a little line. Here's the beauty of this. You can just keep adding line.
Yeah, so you don't have to position yourself. Vladi takes steps forward. He casts the same amount of line each time.
Yeah, exactly. I can add line. Well, if I manage my line a little bit better. There. Adding line, coming up. There's a big rock right there I got to stay away from. Surprised I didn't get a fish on that one right there. There we go. Now, one thing with Spanish nymphing that is a little bit tricky is if you get a real strong wind blowing upstream, it can mess with you a little bit.
Hard to lob into a heavy wind.
My advice for lobbing into a heavy wind is to use a heavier anchor.
Heavier anchor, yeah.
Yep.
Just bullet it through.
Yep. And what'll happen is you won't have quite the nice backward C with your leader, but you'll still be able to keep it down there and control it.
Nice swing.
And there's the lob. What you got to do is immediately strip in line so you can bring up your leader. Oh, that may have been a little bump right there. Got 2 flies on here, 1 dropper. They're both out of Vladi's box. And that little ledge should produce a fish for us right there. Now that wind's starting to mess with me a little bit, but I should be able to get it in there. I have a heavy enough anchor. Hey, maybe I have too heavy of an anchor.
Yeah.
Fly shops love this technique.
Yeah, be prepared with any of the Euro techniques to lose a few flies.
There we go. I'm going to go up a little bit higher on this thing.
Oh, there it goes tight.
Well,
you can really see that.
Rock, but yeah, you have a lot of visibility on the indicator. See how you can see every single rock? That's one of the things I love about this technique.
Now you can use green or red or any bright colored leader material.
Yep. One of the keys too is to have a 10-foot rod.
Yeah.
You can certainly do it with another rod, but it's sure nice to reach up here.
Some of these light spay rods would be perfect for this.
They would actually work for this. Well, let's dance around that rock a little bit more.
Nope, tight again.
Yep. Now, see, you can actually, without hanging up on a rock, just kind of glance off of them. So the palm up enables you to flip that lob where you want it. It's actually pretty accurate. It may look like it's hard to be accurate that way, but you eventually get it. Another nice byproduct of this, of holding the rod this way, is that you almost always throw a nice tuck cast.
Now, one thing that I noticed that you're actually shooting some line, which Vladi isn't.
Well, another advantage of Spanish nymphing is that you get to actually use some fly line. Let's say that the hole is, 25 feet away. I'll do a little demonstration.
There's the advantage of having a longer rod.
All of a sudden I can say I want to go to that rock over there. And depending on how good of a lobber you are, you can shoot it over there. And then you actually have fly line on the water.
Yeah,
now I watched him shoot up to 45 feet of line with this style. Granted, it was a much bigger river than this, but it was really cool. He would shoot it through here and hold it with his hand.
Wow.
Amazing. But so it's a versatile technique.
Well, it adds to one more element of fishing without a true indicator, or float, or bobber, whatever you want to call it. You've learned a lot being on Team USA. You've gone to Spain, Slovakia, Sweden. What techniques have you learned?
Well, the Spanish nymphing technique, for one. I went to Vladi boot camp for Polish nymphing, and that was totally awesome. Another one is the French technique, which is probably it's got to be considered one of the most effective techniques in the world. Well,
you know so much about the French and have fished against them. Why don't you assist Vladi in showing all our viewers about the French techniques? They've won, what, 6 world championships?
And 5 in a row at one point.
So you've learned something from them. Why don't you help us with Vladi so our viewers can see how effective the French techniques are?
That would be fantastic. Let's do it. Now that we're done demonstrating the Spanish nymphing technique on the river, let's take a look at the equipment needed for it. You're going to need a long rod, preferably 10 feet. The line is a weight forward. You can use a 4, 5, or 6. Now, as far as building the leader material, there are a few components that we need to talk about. I usually start off with a store-bought knotless leader, okay? I go with about a 9-foot 4X and I snip it down to about 4 feet. So connected to our weight forward fly line, we have monofilament tapered leader. I usually attach it to a butt section with a barrel knot, and then you head on down the taper. This section would be about 4 feet. Then you get to your colored fluorocarbon. Some people use monofilament, but colored fluorocarbon is a preferred. And you can attach this with a barrel knot or even a surgeon's knot. Now, depending on how far away from you're fishing, this colored fluorocarbon can be about 2 feet, 3 feet. Then you attach it to straight fluorocarbon, and depending on your fishing conditions again, it can be 3X, 4X, 5X, even 6X. Now, the depth of the water is really important here. If you're fishing a 3-foot hole, you want about 6 feet of straight fluorocarbon down to your flies. Then you get to your dropper fly. Now, the knot that connects the dropper is another barrel knot. This time, it has a long tag. You can see the dropper fly attached to the extra tag of the barrel knot. Then you head on down another couple feet until you get to the very end, the point fly of the leader system. And it's usually a heavy weighted fly, or an anchor fly, like what we like to call it. Now, as far as overall length of the leader, I say start off with 9 foot. 9 foot's the easiest thing that you can use to get out on the river right away. You can work yourself up to 15 feet and get out there and have fun with this awesome Spanish nymphing technique.